King Kale of the Oryx dominion stood alone on the battlefield, his once gilded armor, now marred with the scars of 1,000 battles. His sword, a symbol of his reign, had been shattered in the last clash, its jagged remnants hanging loosely from his grasp. Blood, both his and his enemies, soaked the ground beneath him. He had led his forces to victory after victory, crushing rivals from across the stars, securing his place as one of the greatest warriors in the galaxy. But now, as the echoes of battle faded into silence, Kale knew that his time was up. The battle against the Confederation of Galactic Clans had been the final test of his strength. He had united his people, rallied the Oryx dominion for a final, decisive strike, believing that his might and the loyalty of his allies would see him through. Yet, as the dust settled, he found himself surrounded by his enemies, his so-called allies now turned traitors. One by one, his supposed friends had pulled back, leaving him to face the Confederation's forces alone. The Oryx were known for their ferocity in battle, but they were also known for their pragmatism. If victory was no longer assured, they would retreat, leaving their king to perish if necessary. Kale had fought as he always had, with unyielding rage and skill. But even he, the great warrior king, had his limits. His body was exhausted, his wounds too numerous to count. And now the battlefield was quiet, eerily quiet. The Confederation forces, their task complete, had begun to withdraw. There was no one left to fight. The victory was theirs, and Kale was alone. The rest of his people had deserted him. The Oryx, who had once followed him in awe, had left him to die on the battlefield. "Is this how it ends?" Kale muttered, his voice hoarse as he collapsed to his knees, his strength fading fast. Betrayed by my own kind. His thoughts flickered to the countless wars, the alliances he had forged, the countless lives he had taken in the name of conquest. But none of that mattered now. The Oryx, the Drakkar, the Ithar, all the races that had once respected or feared him, had abandoned him without a second thought. His people had cast him aside when he was no longer of use to them. The cold emptiness of betrayal settled heavily upon his chest. It was then that Kale saw a figure approaching through the smoke and wreckage. His vision was blurry, and his senses were fading, but the figure seemed unmistakably human. The soldier was tall, wearing the standard exosuit of the Federation, a sharp contrast to the alien technology that Kale had known all his life. The human moved with purpose, not in the hurried steps of an enemy seeking to finish a fallen foe, but in the deliberate, calm strides of someone who had seen countless battles and had no fear of them. Kale's sword, his last connection to his empire, slipped from his hand as he fell forward onto the blood-soaked earth. The human soldier knelt beside him, and Kale could barely make out his face, young, yet hardened by experience, his expression unreadable behind the helmet. The soldier didn't speak at first, only assessed Kale's wounds with a practiced eye. He reached into a small medical pouch on his belt and produced a healing gel, applying it gently to the worst of Kale's injuries. The Oryx king gritted his teeth as the cold substance numbed the pain. Kale's voice was a rasp. "You are human." The soldier paused in his work, his gloved hand hovering over Kale's wound. "I am," he said, his voice muffled but clear. "And you are King Kale of the Oryx dominion, the last of your kind here." "Why?" Kale's breath was shallow. "Why help me? I am your enemy. Your people will claim victory now." The human soldier looked down at Kale, his gaze steady. "That may be true," he said, "but that doesn't mean I leave someone to die. I've seen too many soldiers left to rot, whether they were enemies or allies. I was raised to believe that everyone deserves a chance to live, to make things right, even if it's just for a little while longer." Kale's mind was clouded, and his thoughts seemed to swim through the fog of his pain. The words of the human soldier, so simple, so unexpected, felt like a strange, warm light piercing the cold darkness of his reality. All of his life, he had been taught that strength was everything. His empire had prided itself on power, on dominance over others, and Kale had always believed that his strength would keep him secure, that it would ensure his place among the stars. But now, in his final moments, it was not strength that saved him, but the compassion of a single human soldier. "Why?" Kale repeated, the question now a whisper. "Why show me mercy?" The soldier didn't hesitate. "Because mercy is strength too. You might not understand that, but it's true. I don't want to see anyone suffer needlessly, no matter who they are." Kale's mind raced. His people had never shown mercy. It was unheard of among the Oryx, who valued conquest and dominance above all else. His empire had crushed entire civilizations, extinguished whole species, all in the name of expansion. And yet here, in his final moments, he was given something he had never known: compassion. The soldier continued working, his actions efficient and gentle. Despite his alien nature, Kale felt a sense of peace settle over him, a feeling he had never expected to experience from an enemy. The pain in his body lessened as the human worked to stabilize him, applying patches and administering medicine. After what felt like an eternity, the soldier stepped back and removed his helmet, revealing a young man with dark eyes and a solemn expression. "There," the soldier said, his voice quieter now. "I've done what I can for now. You'll survive. I'll get you to the Federation base. We'll keep you safe." Kale struggled to sit up, the weight of his body still too much for him to bear. "You would risk your life for me?" he asked, his voice barely more than a breath. "Even though I was your enemy?" The human soldier smiled, though it was a sad, knowing smile. "The fight's over now, King Kale. I didn't help you because I expect something in return. I helped because it's the right thing to do." Kale's heart swelled with an emotion he had never known. He had always believed that power was the ultimate authority, that the strong should rule. But this soldier had shown him that there was another kind of power, one that transcended strength, one that came from compassion and mercy. In that moment, Kale understood what he had been blind to for all his life. True strength lay not in domination, but in the willingness to help those in need, even when they were your enemy. The human soldier helped Kale to his feet, supporting him as they moved toward the Federation ship that would take him away from the battlefield. For the first time in years, Kale felt something he had never thought possible: hope. He had been abandoned by all the races he had conquered, by the very people who had once worshipped him. But this human had offered him something greater than any victory he had ever known. He had offered him a second chance. And for the first time, King Kale felt that perhaps it was time for him to let go of his old ways and embrace a new kind of strength, one that could reshape the future of the galaxy.